Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Laura and I am going to be facilitating a question and answer period with HYENAZ, who are joining us from Berlin. And there they are. So HYENAZ are a Berlin-based sound and movement collective of two people, Kat and Adrienne, and their immersive performances, dance tracks, soundscapes, performative installations, and audiovisual works that they produce utilize the sonic shape-shifting of field recordings gathered in the process of site-specific works. And so today we're going to be talking a lot about their current project called Perimeter, that is a virtual reality project, but also kind of tapping into their process and their music and kind of a little bit of everything. So Kat and Adrienne, thank you for being here. We're very excited to have you. And
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit yesterday about your process, and we'll probably touch back on that. But I wanted to kind of start today just talking about the actual project Perimeter, and the genesis for it, and how you kind of mentioned a little bit yesterday about how it kind of came to be. But it's such an interesting kind of it's been an interesting trajectory from the work that I've seen live. So I'm curious about how that particular project started and how it evolved to where it is now.
Yeah, it's hard to determine exactly like the one point where it begins, because it is part of a larger project that we've been doing called Foreign Bodies, which we talked about I think last night, which is a project exploring bodies in motion and the restriction of regulation of bodies in motion. And we did a lot of field work on this question, and doing a lot of research and writing around this, and but also sound collecting. So you might say that the genesis of this piece would be that we were on Samothraki, this island in the north of Greece, and we were doing some field recording there, but and we were in a town, and we came across just a fence, and it had a beautiful sound, and we always carry our recorder with us, so we made a set of recordings of this fence and its resonances, and then and it was on the edge of the town. We were on the borderlands of the town. I think that also became so part of the idea of the perimeter a little bit as well. And then a little bit later, we just took like a section of that metal bar, and we used an arpeggiator, different kind of arpeggiator, and sampling, and transform the sound a little bit, and then made that the basis of the piece, which the musical piece, which you all have heard. And then we also include other sounds. Actually, we like to really document and to really give like a full kind of context to everything we use. So another part of the sound was taken when we were volunteering in the kitchen of a place that was serving food to migrants who were trying to make the crossing into the UK from France, from Dunkirk. And there was just like a funny little step in this kitchen, like it made this kind of little funny sound, and we took that, and that became part also of that soundscape. So that's sort of the sound origins of the piece. But maybe you want to talk about the conceptual origins or something.
Yeah, in Foreign Bodies, well, actually there was a piece we did in our project before called Binaries, and I think for us maybe this was a catalyst, because Binaries was a part in our show where we would get the audience to start shouting at each other different opposites or seeming opposites as a way of raising the energy in the room. And it was kind of a way to talk through the anger that we might feel around categories being so polarizing, and the kind of ridiculousness of this idea, because we don't really, our actual world is I mean, it feels polarized often, but often we really also feel like on a spectrum. And so we were thinking through this idea conceptually in our video. And so when we went into the Foreign Bodies project, we thought, why don't we deepen this practice a little bit, where each video and each song is formulated around a kind of conception of relationality. So our next one was called Proximity. So we were really thinking about how nearness or being far away or being connected in different kinds of proximities, like also digital proximities or diaspora proximities, different kinds of ways that we glue our communities together, change how we feel about each other, and how we care, and what that care then asks us to do or motivates us to do. Like, how do we care for our neighbor because they happen to be living down the street differently than somebody in a different nation, for example. So proximity allowed us to think a little bit through those questions. And then our next work in Foreign Bodies was called Columns. And this was about, I mean, in a way, like being lined up, being ordered, waiting in line. It was about pilgrimaging. It was about who is first in line, and how one gets in this kind of ordering of space. Like, it was more about linearity, I guess. And this one is, and so in this one, we thought we're also going to ask questions around relationality, and in a way that, although we're all completely unique persons and we have very different stories to tell, maybe we can speak more about how we relate to the same thing rather than how we are the same thing. So how we relate to the idea of being both inside or outside of a group came up for us as an interesting question, because we would so often travel around, and this would come up in shows where just people feel just not part of their own community. They feel that they don't quite fit in, and they would come it's been really moving to hear some of these stories. People would come up to us and just say, I don't feel like I really belong here. And I'm so glad you're here, because somehow they felt they could relate. And that was really interesting too, because from the outside, I think a lot of times we think of each other as really fitting into some group, but then on the inside, I think so many of us feel like we don't fit in, whatever it is. Like, I'm not really an artist. I'm just like, this imposter syndrome. I'm not really a musician, or whatever. So yeah, we just wanted to start that kind of conversation in Perimeter.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I'm curious from your perspective as you're making this, because there are so many interviews. Did anything stand out to you about how your subjects related to each other, or in the process of making this work? Was there anything that kind of stood out as you were interviewing the subjects that you were?
I think that for almost everybody, the perimeter was a space of discomfort. And except for one person who really kind of felt like they, I'm paraphrasing them and maybe speaking for them, but one of the artists, Martini, really is quite happy to live on this perimeter between the performer and the real self, and is happy to kind of interweave these things. So she's quite comfortable in this territory, but the other four of us had some aspects of discomfort and sadness, but on the other hand, also, I think that for me, I think I found it therapeutic to look at the ways in which I'm internally contradictory, and to then kind of accept that. So maybe that was the case for others. I'm not sure.
I found it really interesting how a lot of the physical sensations that people wanted to explore came up and were similar, of kind of like Simone was talking about having like a blanket put over them and this kind of squashing down. And then people would actually have physical, we also asked people to explore physically in the interview which I'm not sure if it's as visible because I had to cut out some of the interviews, but in any case,
Yeah.
to explore physically these sensations. And there was a lot around like floating and levitating and then being pushed down again, and you know what it means to feel like both inside, where you kind of feel lifted and you feel held and accepted, whereas feeling on the outside or pushed out is this stifling. And so that was nice to see that being mirrored
Yeah.
in different experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And physicality is such a huge part of your work. I think as a viewer, it seems that it's such a key focus even in your work. And I'm curious just about kind of thinking around physicality and the digital space. Did you come across any challenges or like any new kind of ideas when working in virtual reality that you hadn't considered in the physical realm before? Was there anything that kind of stood out to you? Because I know we were talking a little bit yesterday about digital intimacies and creating those types of spaces, which I feel like your shows and your live work is very intimate, like with the audience. There's an experience that you can't replicate digitally, but I'm curious how that kind of physical space translated for you into the digital.
Yeah, I think that on the one hand, the work allows you to become intimate with the artists, but it's one way, insofar as you cannot talk to the artists. I mean, they're not physically there. They're not there, or even virtually there. So for the viewer, it's still somewhat one way, and I think that I would like to create I think we would like to create virtual spaces that maybe bring the audience and the artists more into a kind of a dialogue. But it's very challenging just because of the nature of the infrastructure of the internet, which is also an issue of access and equality, because to facilitate these kinds of digital spaces, you need to have a lot of infrastructure available and high-speed internet connections and things like that, and that's just not a fact. So in some ways, like just like a chat room in 2001 on the IRC is more interactive than most virtual spaces are at this point in their development. It still feels quite rudimentary at this point, I would say.
I mean, I would also bring into just that for me, most of the project was so physical and present because, you know, and also there's many layers of years. So the field recording was one process, which was actually over the course of several years, because we've been just doing it like adjacent to touring, because we've never gotten funding actually for the project. We've always built it around other things. So sometimes we're doing shows as we travel slowly and, you know, take trains and buses and hitchhike and all of that to get all these field recordings. So there's a long time process. And then when we did get these other performers involved in it, you know, we although it was during COVID and we had to have strict conditions about who could be in the room. So each of the performers performed on their own. You know, we were physically present with them and helping to direct them, because we also did the documentaries with them, so we spent time in the room with them at that point, and then we were developing the physical performances with them when we were directing it during the video filming process. And then, of course, there was just spending time with their bodies and voices on screen in the editing process and the sound. So like it was like a long time journey for us. And then finally putting it in virtual space, it's like that was like the last stop, I guess. And so it's hard for me also being on the inside of it to sort of see how it is perceived as walking in for the first time, because it's such a long journey. But one thing I will say that I love about digital space is that I love the idea of the hyperlink, you know, the idea that you can walk in and then it references this long history of other things that happen. So like you see a performer on a screen, and I see this a lot from a queer feminist perspective, that the performer is not an object, but is a voice and a body and has a history and a migration story, and you can speak and listen to that performer. So that for me in itself is like a hyperlink to the video. And what I would love to have as well would be like some kind of visual hyperlinks to the objects that were sampled, because we have photos and documentation from that, and that could be interesting to have to our artifacts of the sound recordings somehow. So if I were really to like deepen this, I think I would go in that direction.
Okay.
We hope to. Yeah, we really hope to take this further. This is our first foray into this kind of environment, and yeah, they're very good ideas which we should pursue.
Yeah, and I'm surprised it's your first foray into the VR world, because it is very immersive, and it feels like we are experiencing something. Like it's one of the, I was telling you before, it's like one of the only things I've seen during the pandemic that actually feels engaging in a digital realm that way. Like there's something about it. And I think it is the intimacy. Like there is a lot of vulnerability and exposure that the performers are kind of gifting the audience in a very similar way that I feel you perform live as well. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And I just wanted to kind of, I know we touched on this a little bit before, but I just wanted to kind of ask again about the pandemic and about your process and how it's changed what, I know obviously you've made this digital piece, but moving forward, are you imagining kind of, integrating that more into your practice as it was previous to the pandemic, or how are you imagining kind of your evolution coming out of this time?
Yeah, that's interesting. When it first came on, like in the sense that we were really realizing that it was real, because I think it felt far away for a little bit of time, and then it was like, yeah, except Adrian's
like
Adrian maintains.
This is not good. This is not okay. This is okay. It's coming.
Yeah.
The character in the movie, there's a disaster happening, and like no one, or a dream where like no one kind of like reacts, and you're like the media.
Yeah.
But that was in January 2020. I vouch for that. She was like, no, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And it took us like in March. We're like, okay, yeah, it is. But shortly after that, we actually tried our what we were traveling, which this critical magic, which was like a group chaos magic ritual where we would shout an intention out into the universe, and we tried doing this online. So that was the first online performance we ever did, and we were trying to see if we could feel each other online.
And people said that they did. I mean, from like a performance perspective, I was like, oh, production value was very low and it's very static, and I don't know if anyone is really enjoying this. I have no idea, but people said afterwards that they felt really connected to us and to everybody else who was there.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah, it felt like good for all of us, kind of like a therapy for all of us at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good. Like it pushed us in so many directions. I mean, I think that just generationally, I didn't grow up recording everything I ever did. And so like, it's hard to do that, to like think about that. It's not that it needs to be done, but it is an interesting format, and to have things available. And for people who still can't leave home or for whatever reason, I think it's great to have things online. And I mean, it's amazing the number of lectures that you can watch and free education that you can tap into. That's just like exploded, has been pretty awesome. So I want to keep going in that direction. However, I am of course also happy to get back into spaces where we can, practice being physically intimate with each other and what that means. So hopefully we can continue on like gleichzeitig, like doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I can see it. And then just kind of going back to foreign bodies, is that a project that's you're still like, this is part of that? Is that correct? That's part of is it still kind of evolving as well? Like that's kind of a overarching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're kind of, so it's been running for years because there was different reasons why we started it. One of them was just that like just exhaustion from the music industry and the idea around making albums and releasing albums and putting all this energy into an album, putting it out there. And then we had the experience with our last full album that there was a lot of material in there which didn't get noticed. Like one or two things did because they were the singles or whatever, and then the rest was kind of like was buried. So we wanted to sort of give ourselves time to explore each like aspect of it in its like own like its own time, like its own chronology, and to give each one like as much time and attention as needed, and then to present it as a thing that we hope you want to pay attention to and interact with. And then we had different theoretical concerns that we wanted to explore in over time. Like it wasn't like just like one music video or something like that, or one song or one piece of writing that we wanted to give a lot of time to, and also to give us a real context for our film recording practices, sort of to bring that into a project. And now I feel like we're still in the middle of it, but we're also in some ways coming to the end of it to some degree, like in our thinking. We both just read it, well, I'm still reading, and Kate just read this great book called Burnout Society. I forget the name of the author right now, but it's Kate's looking it up for us.
Yeah. He actually wrote it in German initially.
Yeah.
Müdigkeit.
Müdigkeit-Gesellschaft.
Genau, Müdigkeit-Gesellschaft.
Yeah, but and he is talking about how the whole epidemiological model of self and other and friend and enemy and self and foreign kind of thing, like how it's actually breaking down, and now actually we have this kind of just, instead we're sort of emerging into a world of just of kind of like no longer difference, but like sort of
too much of the same. Like this is what he kind of argues. Too
Right.
much. He puts it as too much positivity, but not so much in the sense of like happiness. But in a way, because he talks about the way that the worker exploits him or herself now, and is consensual in that.
Right.
And like kind of makes it into the idea of like enjoyment. And it's interesting, I think, really, because we think so much about work and labor, and it's like he's proposing that we're in the midst of a paradigm shift. And it's not that this friend enemy thing is over. Certainly binaries aren't over as in terms of how we conceive of them, and yet we're also see ourselves trying to resist or move out of that, but towards what are we moving, which is interesting.
Right.
It seems to be like we're moving into the universality of the consumer,
Right.
Identities being defined by identities, and so anyway, that's a long way of saying, like, it seems like we're starting to take in other ideas now, which we might actually close the project gradually by challenging some of the paradigms and some of the ideas we started with 5 or 6 years ago. But that'll be that's still a process, probably still like 2 years of work in that. We have still a lot of sounds to explore, a lot of writing that like we've done that we want to realize as we do that.
Also I think the period of field recording around these ideas may have come to an end, partly because we stopped traveling in the last year and a half. And we had so much. We really had so much. And we built 22 skeletons of tracks, which aren't going to all be actual tracks. But we do have 2. We actually just released one. We had a premiere of one called Signals just now, which is about, it's about audibility. It's about performativity and how we signal to kind of be understood, how to be intelligible. So this is kind of about speaker listener relationship. And then we have another one, which is a long time coming, but will come out soon, called XC2. And this is about, it's an interesting theory that, now I'm forgetting the professor's name, who formulated this idea of nation XC2, which is basically about a diasporic nationhood built around the idea that one's original nation actually doesn't exist anymore. And this came from an environmental perspective where islands are actually disappearing. And so people are no longer able to live there. And there's new formations of either physical proximity or diasporic community. And in any case, we worked with an amazing, an asylum. Yeah, Maxine Burkett. Yeah, as the professor. We worked with an amazing asylum seeker and interpreter who is from Gambia originally and lives in Italy, and turns out is also an incredible singer. Yeah. So we were doing this interview with him and just chatting with him about his journey. And he had been one of the persons who had come across by boat, and like a very risky situation. And he also was a beautiful singer, and he sang for us, and we have a recording that we worked on a track with him and collaborated with him to make a video. So there's still like things that are coming out in the project, but that were actually recorded like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm feeling very verbose today. So if if it's too much, then
no, I could talk for hours. Like, this is great. But it's interesting because you do approach all your ideas very holistically, it seems. Like, it's not just about, like you were saying, it's not just about the track, like it's everything around that, and that what comes from that can lead in so many directions. So it's very interesting for me to hear about your process and hear about how your ideas flow into each other as well. So and I could talk to you forever, but in the interest of time, because we're starting the live stream in 10 minutes, I just wanted to pass this over to Julia.
Sabine just told me in the chat it can be prolonged until 1 p.m. 1 your time.
So Julia or Becky, did you have any questions before we have to move to the live stream?
It was my friend was saying, why was the movement so fast? The cuts of the editing, so the movement of the video. First.
Very good question. Yeah, we were in Canada actually, and we were in Alberta. At
Calgary.
Sorry, I'm sorry. We're in Calgary for
Sled Island.
For Sled Island Festival, and we saw very interesting artist whose name is Tasman Richardson, who is doing work which involves found materials. So like a lot of video stuff, 80s, 90s, that have like soundtrack, bit of music, possibly from a movie, with like the character saying a word or door slamming or whatever, and he's cutting all these things together and making these different pieces speak to each other, and it's done very fine, kind of at a frame by frame level, not one frame, normally about 3 or 4 frames is the standard, and it's a very interesting. It pushes the medium of the moving image quite far, because it allows you to kind of juxtapose things and to present kind of opposites or just present difference in the same moment. That's one, and so we adapted that to our work as our editing. I think it also just appeals to us as musicians, because it treats images like music, like notes, like samples.
I see.
And so it's just then it just appeals to us. Like I feel
it goes with the beat, it goes with movement, the music, the speech with a picture, moving picture. Exactly. Yeah, makes sense.
We actually export the audio as stems, so the different parts of the song, we export them separately, and we bring them into our video editor, and so we can see the audio, and so maybe the kick drum and this hi-hat or whatever it is, we can see them, and we're lining up the images to those sounds. Yeah.
And my friend and me, I don't know, we saw, I don't know if it's a critique. We saw that the tongue was cut, and we saw it was this sweet. it didn't look like a real tongue.
Yeah. It wasn't my actual tongue.
Was this your intention? Was this?
Yeah, it was just that, but the prop is how it was like it was the prop, and that's how it presented. Yeah, it wasn't unfortunately wasn't something we made for ourselves. It was something that we just bought from a mass produced item. Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting why you chose that, because that was around speech. And I don't know if you want to talk a little around like your, a lot of the performers, we brought in different props into our work that had carried particular symbolism, and Adrienne wanted to talk about like this tongue.
Okay, so it's because I have one of my parents is Jewish, and one of my parents is not Jewish, and that's the thing that I explored in my performance, was feeling inside, not inside Judaism, and I have a few like palpable physical memories that really locate me in Jewishness, and one of them is just that my grandmother used to give me offal, and which is like intestines and tongue to eat. And I didn't really know what I was eating. Cool. Yeah, I didn't really know what I was eating. And then when I realized it was tongue and that I'd eaten tongue, I really enjoyed it. I thought it tasted great, actually. But I still have this there was something just physically really strange to me about a mouth and a tongue eating a tongue. Like it's just like, it's unsettling. It's like unheimlich, and so this stayed with me. There's a strong physical memory, and so I decided to bring it into the piece. And then it got other, and when you have sometimes it's something that's very raw like that, then other meanings attached to it, like it's like a magnet, and it became about speech and being able to speak or not being able to speak as something, as someone. And originally our amazing stylist and I guess you could say he did like kind of artistic direction over the performances. His name is Jörg Kronager. He was like, yeah, just go and buy a tongue, like an ox tongue or a cow tongue or whatever. No, he wanted a pig tongue for this performance.
Really?
It looks human, and I was like, pig tongue, like that's a little unkosher. And yeah.
Yeah, it's Jewish.
So,
not to mention you're vegan.
Yeah, I'm not vegan. I'm aspirationally vegan, but yeah,
almost.
So then I went to Kaufland, and like I was looking at the tongues, these like cow tongues. I was just like, I'm not going to be able to. I can't do this, and so in the end, went for this kind of like novelty, like impress your friends with your silly tongue for Halloween kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I can relate totally to that, because my friend visited me once, and I said, I have this favorite dish from Bolivia. I'm half Bolivian, and it's cow tongue. And she said, oh, it's not a good omen when you want to be a singer, a musician, to eat a tongue, because it takes away maybe its speed. A bit, symbolic.
Yeah,
interesting.
On some deep psychological level, it's something very disturbing.
Something does it. Yeah.
It's been really wonderful listening to this, and I thank you guys for your vulnerability. When I was in the VR room, like I really felt the vulnerability. I felt connected to it. So that was a really wonderful experience. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to just take the opportunity to thank the other performers, Makosi Kabi, Simone Pateau, and Martini Cherryfurter, and for their vulnerability, and for also giving permission to screen the documentaries, because initially they agreed to doing the music video, and then we said, well, can we also show the documentaries for this project? And they said yes, it was fine. So and they were really vulnerable there and raw. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to tell everyone who might be watching this after our live stream to go check out Perimeter on hyenaz.com. Is that correct? It's still going to be up there?
Yes. Yes, it'll now be up for eternity.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank
we're gonna end the live stream, but hyenas are up next for Hexanat. They're the first performers up on the live stream. So if you're watching this right now live, you can tune in to our live stream and see them in action.
Yes,
So-
thanks for the great facilitation, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Yes.
Yeah,
So
thanks
Becky,
to all of you.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.